Hey guys, welcome to my channel. We are reading Monster High, Monster Rescue, Go Get Lagoona. We are on chapter 10. I love this book, by the way. It's awesome. It's really cool and interesting. Sorry, I can't even control my camera right now. So, yeah, chapter 10. I'm just going to start reading. Chapter 10. It took several minutes for Draculaura's head to stop spinning. She was pretty sure she wasn't moving, and the ground under her felt strong and solid. But every time she opened her eyes, the bright blue sky swirled by in a speeding blur. At last, though, the world seemed to slow down as Draculaura's dizziness faded. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, blinked, and looked around. Draculaura wasn't quite sure where she was. But she knew one thing. She was nowhere near the ocean. There was no sign of water anywhere, for that matter. Just a vast expanse of dry, dusty dirt for as far as she could see. There's plenty of time to worry about that later, Draculaura told herself. Right now, I've got to find my ghoul friends. Draculaura stood up and used her hands to shield her eyes from the relentless sun. Frankie! She called out. Claudine! Cleo! There was no response. Frankie! Claudine! Cleo! Draculaura waited, straining her ears to hear anything. Still nothing. Frankie! Claudine! Cleo! Draculaura! Over here! Ghouls! Draculaura cried in excitement. Where are you? Suddenly she saw Frankie's head pop up from behind a shrubby bush. This way, Drac! We've been looking for you! Draculaura hurried over and pulled her ghoul friends into an enormous hug. I was so worried I wouldn't find you, she said. Is everybody okay? Better than okay, Frankie announced. She held up both hands and wiggled all her fingers. If I hadn't been wearing my super strong wetsuit, I would have lost a body part for sure. All the ghouls laughed until Draculaura gasped, startling everyone. Then she spun around and raced away. Drac! Draculaura, what's wrong? Claudine called as the other ghouls chased after her. It's lost, Draculaura cried. The skillet! It's gone! She fell to her knees and started digging in the dirt, the dry red dirt. Dusty clouds rose around her, making Draculaura cough, but she just dug deeper. Frankie, Claudine, and Cleo all exchanged a worried glance. It was in my hand. I was holding it so tight, Draculaura continued in a panic. It was to be here. Help me look. It can't be far. Frankie knelt down beside Draculaura and placed her hand on Drac's shoulder. Hey, she said in a quiet voice, maybe we should... I have to find it, Draculaura interrupted her. How else are we going to get home? Draculaura's fantastic question hung in the air and made her start digging even harder. Listen, ghoul, Claudine began. This is not your fault, okay? Nobody could have held on to the skillet during the storm. Draculaura shook her head. It's the only way home, she said. We have to find it. Claudine is right, Cleo said firmly. The important thing is that we're together. So what if the skillet is missing? We'll figure out something else. That's what most monsters do. Draculaura stopped digging. She covered her face with the dusty hands. I'm so sorry, ghouls, she groaned. This is awful, and it's all my fault. No, it was the storm's fault, Frankie reminded her. We don't even know where we are. There's no sign of the ocean. Obviously, the storm was strong enough to blow us into the middle of nowhere, Claudine said with a big sigh. Something like that, Frankie said, nodding. This is the worst, Draculaura said. Now we're even farther from Lagoona, and how are we going to get home again? Dad will be worried sick. Your dad, Cleo suggested suddenly. Do you think he could fly us? Draculaura blinked. I don't know, she said. That would be a really long trip. Plus, my dad thinks we're in the middle of the ocean, not, wherever we are. If we could find Lagoona, Frankie said slowly, we could use her monster web to send a message to Mr. D. I'm sure he'd be able to find a way to bring us back to Monster High. That's an awesome idea, cheered Claudine. Don't forget, Mr. D is the one who gave us the Monster Mapalog. He'll definitely be able to think of something. Thinking of Monster Mapalog made Draculaura feel even worse. Ugh, she groaned. The Monster Mapalog has been a treasure of Monster Heirloom for millennia, and now it's ruined forever. You can't use it without the skullet. Don't talk like that, Claudine replied. We might still be able to find the skillet, but I agree with Frankie and Cleo. We can't spend too much time searching for it right now. We have bigger problems to figure out, like where exactly we are. Frankie spoke up. She turned to Cleo. You've spent your entire life in the desert. Does any of this look familiar? Cleo shook her head. Sorry, Ghoul, she replied. My desert is basically gold, sand, and shadowy duns. I don't see even one tiny monument to my family out here. It's like another world. I suppose that would have been too much to hope for, Frankie said. Draculaura started at the unusual landscape around her. The red dirt, the stunted, scrubby plants, and rocky mesas. Suddenly her eyes lightened up. I know, she explained. We must be on the outback. Outback of what? Cleo asked in confusion. No, it's called the outback, Draculaura explained. It's an area down under, near the Great Barrier Reef. I read about it in my book. It can be extremely dangerous here, and the heat is relentless. We really need to get back to the ocean and the Great Barrier Reef. That's not all we need, Cleo said. I learned a thing or two from a lifetime in the desert, and I don't know if we'll be able to make it to the Great Barrier Reef without finding an oasis, or at least some water and shade on the way. Look at these bushes, though, Claudine pointed out. They're so short and stubby. They barely provide enough shade for my shoe, let alone all four of us. Probably because there's not enough water here for them to grow bigger, Draculaura said. Just because we can't see water doesn't mean we can't find it, Cleo told the ghouls. She knelt down and studied the dirt carefully for a few minutes. What is she looking for? Draculaura wondered. But Cleo was studying the ground with such intense concentration that Drac didn't want to disturb her. Ah, here we go, Cleo said suddenly as her fingers traced one of the cracks in the red dirt. Follow me. Cleo charged off with the other ghouls right behind Draculaura. Couldn't tell if Cleo was following a faint trail of dirt or a network of crack and spread across the barren landscape. Either way, though, Cleo seemed completely confident. As they moved through the sunny outback, Draculaura couldn't help noticing that it was strangely beautiful. The sun was beating down hard, though, and Drac was starting to feel a little light-headed. One look at Claudine told Draculaura that her friend felt the same way. I'm not sure how long Claudine can last without it. Cleo stopped abruptly. Draculaura had to move to the side to avoid running into her. See the ridge ahead? Asked Cleo. There should be a freshwater lake on the other side of it. How do you know? Asked Claudine, as she pushed her thick hair back from her face. Those cracks in the dirt aren't just cracks, Cleo explained. They're tributaries. It's itty-bitty streams. They dried up because of how small they were, which made it easy for the water in them to evaporate. But following the crack should lead us to a source where we'll have plenty of fresh water for us to drink. Ghoul, you're a genius, Frankie said approvingly. Anything to help my ghoul friends. even getting a little too up close to the personal with the dirt," answered Cleo cheerfully. Then Frankie turned to Claudine. "You can make it. We're almost there." Claudine flashed a smile. "Can't wait," she replied, "because this ghoul is parched." "Not for long," Cleo sang out as the ghouls hitched up the ridge. But when they reached the top, her grin faded. I, she stammered. She didn't need to say anything, though. The ghouls could see for themselves that there wasn't a single drop of water for them to drink. "It's a dry lake bed," Draculaura said. "An empty crater, now that all the water has dried up." "I'm so sorry, ghouls," Cleo said. "I expected there to be a lake here. I let you down." Draculaura wrapped her arms around Cleo's shoulder and gave her a quick hug. "No, you didn't," Draculaura reassured her. "How could you know?" "Actually," Frankie began. When the ghouls turned to look at her, they saw sparks twinkling near the bolts of her neck. "We might be in the perfect spot to find fresh water," Frankie announced. She dropped her backpack on the ground and started rummaging in it. Draculaura couldn't help smiling. Those sparks flying from Frankie's bolts were a good sign. No, they were a great sign. "I present you with my custom-built, supercharged water-finding invention," Frankie said excitedly as she pulled a thin silver rod out of her backpack. Claudine and Draculaura recognized it right away. They started to cheer, but Cleo just looked confused. "What is that, some sort of skipper?" she asked. "It's just a little something Frankie invented while we were trying to rescue you," Draculaura replied. "But what does it do?" said Cleo. Draculaura smiled mysteriously. "Prepare to be amazed." "Hold this, please," Frankie said as she passed the stick to Draculaura. Then she rubbed her hands together until shimmery sparks jumped from her fingertips. As soon as Draculaura gave the stick back to Frankie, it started to quiver and jerk her forward. "Voltacious," Frankie cheered. "Ghouls, we are definitely in the right place." "But," Cleo began. Before she could utter another word, Frankie plunged the stick into the ground. Whoosh! An enormous fountain of clean, clear water sprung up from the dirt. Dry dirt. And that is the end of Chapter 10. Next video, we are doing Chapter 11. Have a great day, guys.